progress.
IT asked me to record it, so make sure we capture everything. So we are ready to go.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Tuesday, October 26th, 2021 Washington County Board of Commissioners meeting. Clerk Moss, announcements and roll call, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Washington County Board of Commissioners also meeting as the Board of Directors for Clean Water Services and all other county services districts is now meeting this regular session, October 26, 2021. Commissioner Willie.
Here.
Commissioner Rogers.
Here.
Commissioner Fye.
She's here.
Vice Chair Treese.
Here.
And Chair Harrington.
Here. Thank you, Clerk Moss. The first item, let me announce an agenda change since our first published agenda. We've added item E1 under presentations. That'll be a presentation from the Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Community Development, the quarterly report for July through September of 2021. Clerk Moss, who do we have signed up to testify before us for our first public comment period for 2 minutes?
We did have one signed up, Madam Chair, but I am not seeing them online, so we will reserve it, and then we'll have one at the end.
All righty, thank you. The next item on the agenda, or the next section of the agenda, is our consent agenda. We have 2 items from Clean Water Services, 2 items from Land Use and Transportation, 1 item from Health and Human Services, and 1 item from Support Services for a total of 6 items. What are the wishes of the Commission? A move approval from Commissioner Rogers, second from Vice Chair Treese. All those in favor, please vote by saying aye or raise your hand. Thank you, Commissioners. Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously 5-0. Next, we'll move on to proclamations. This evening, we have our first ever proclamation related to Native American Heritage Month. And for this, I'd like to welcome our Chief Equity Officer, Ms. Latricia Tillman. And there may be others who will be joining her this evening. So Clerk Moss, I hope you know who we want to make sure you advance this evening.
Good afternoon, Chair Harrington and members of the board. I am looking for Gary Wesley, Destiny Ketney, and Kanea Ketney. And Christina Barbosa is here, and hopefully.
I see Kanea and Destiny under MG. Oh, no, sorry, it was before MG.
There we go. Here they come.
Oh, and there's Gary Wesley. And welcome to Christina Barbosa. Take it away, Latricia.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Harrington and Commissioners. For the record, my name is Latricia Tillman, and I'm the Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer for Washington County. I'm also a registered member of the Sisseton-Wapton Band of the Sioux Tribe. My mother and grandmother were the last of my family to be enrolled tribal members. And I'm pleased to offer a few introductory remarks on our cultural heritage celebrations. But first, I'm going to turn it over to Gary Wesley. He is a member of the Kalapuya tribe from the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde and the Assiniboine Sioux from Fort Belknap tribe. And Gary will lead us in a welcoming into this virtual space and a blessing. Following that, Gary and Destiny, following my statements, Gary, Destiny, Kanea, who are both from the Navajo Nation, will read that proclamation. So go ahead, Gary.
Nihlawach. Good evening, my relatives. My name is Gary Wesley. Thank you for the introduction. Board of Commissioners and Chairwoman, thank you for this opportunity to welcome the space on behalf of my people as a representative. This is a very important month for our people as it highlights all the heritage of not only my tribe, but Native peoples throughout the nation. So tonight I'd like to start with the prayer to welcome the space, as some of the things we'll be talking tonight in the proclamation are very, I guess, heavy topics, you could say. And it's important that we welcome it with a healing mindset. So I'll be saying the prayer in the Chinakwawa language, which is the language of the Grand Ronde tribe. But as you know, I'm also multiple tribes. So bear with me as I'm learning the language too. So I'd like to begin with the prayer right now. Sahi, Tai, Haimasi, Puskanwik, Ikta Uksan, Naika Munk Kim Tex, Naika Ali Tilakam, Naika Kim Tex Kap, Na U Tilakam, Naika Kush, Wak Sudret Slush, Naika Kush, Naika Tilakam, Bash, Dret Slush, Wax. Naika Munk Kim Tex Uk Ili Piuk Sa, Naika Munk Kim Tex Uk, Sai Kalak Pi Tarawat Wit Kilakam. I Masi Pus Kanwik Lat Miyat Yak Uksan, Naika Kui, Naika Chu, Yawak Kappa Slush Dum Dum, I Masi Pukuk Mek Uksan, I Masi. Now for a translation, it says, Creator, we thank you for everything today. We honor our ancestors. We think about our elders and we hope they are well. We hope our families are well also. We honor our earth and the water. We honor the water, bird, and four-legged beings, people. Thank you for everyone here today. We hope you all are here with a good heart. And thank you for today. Haimasi. Now I'd like to pass it on to our students here who will be reading the first sections of the proclamation.
Hello. My name is Kanaya. Okay. A proclamation is in honor of Native American Heritage Month. Whereas Washington County is committed in creating an inclusive community that celebrates diversity and ensure all residents that adequate opportunities to lead a healthy, peaceful, and safe and sustainable lives. And
whereas in honor of the cultures, traditions, and accomplishments of Native Americans that have shaped our community, we also acknowledge our nation's history of colonialism that has inflicted discrimination, degradation, violence, and genocide upon indigenous people. And
whereas the area currently known as Washington County rests on land that was first inhabited by Aphrodite Calapians, also called the Tualatin people, who flourished here for thousands of years. And
whereas settlers began arriving in what will become Washington County in 1830s to take land from the Alapoli that was not ceded nor paid for until 1855 under the Land and Valley Treaty. And
whereas Alapoli signed an 1851 treaty with the United States, which was never ratified, and in 1855 signed onto the Willamette Valley Treaty with many other tribes, which was ratified, ceding all their lands to the United States in exchange for a permanent reservation, supplies, and services. And
whereas the Aphrodite owned Wapato Lake in Washington County previous to their removal, and the lake was drained to make farmlands, destroying the vast Wapato fields, which were a primary source of sustenance for the Aphrodite people for thousands of years. And
whereas Alafati were firstly removed from their homelands to Great Rock Indian Reservation in 1856. They were mistreated by the U.S. government and Indian agents. We denied land, adequate food, medicine, and services for nearly 20 years, causing many Native people to live in poverty and suffer untimely deaths. And
Whereas the first off-reservation Indian boarding school, Oregon, was established in Hillsboro, many Native students from area reservations were removed from their families and sent to assimilate white culture, which was meant to disconnect them from their native and language. This disconnection from their community, identity, and culture continues to pre-exist through generational trauma and hardship. And
whereas the Grand Ronde Indian Reservation was terminated by the United States Congress in 1954 in Public Law 588, causing the displacement and disfranchisement of thousands of Native peoples of Oregon, including the Atfalati peoples, who were then forced to leave the former reservation, causing further loss of Native languages and cultures. And
whereas Confederate tribes of Great Rock Community of Oregon and reestablished as recognized Native nation in 1983 under Public Law 98-165, without Alafati people was members with the beginning of the process of restoring the tribe, community, and cultures of the tribal nation. And
whereas Alafati people endure to this day as members of the Confederate tribes of the Grand Ronde Community of Oregon, having survived catastrophic diseases, loss of their ancestral lands, forced relocation to a reservation, long-term mismanagement at the reservation, family separations due to the removal of children to boarding schools, and termination. And
whereas after overcoming numerous setbacks over the years to regain treaty-acquired land and federal recognition as a sovereign nation, the Confederate Tribes of Grand Ronde Community have established a successful government to serve the needs of their members and also generally support the advancement of underserved communities throughout Northwest Oregon. And
whereas we seek to repair the trauma of past oppression and broken trust, both locally and regionally, by lifting up Indigenous cultures and voices and striving together to build a future of shared hope and promise for all.
Now, therefore, be it resolved that on this 26th day of October, 2021, the Washington County Board of Commissioners does hereby proclaim November 2021 as Native American Heritage Month, a time to celebrate the rich and diverse cultures of Indigenous people, to raise awareness about our shared history and acknowledge the important contributions that Native Americans have made to our community and our nation.
Thank you so much, Gary, Kanea, and Destiny, for reading that proclamation. I would just like to offer a couple words before we turn it over to the board for your adoption of the proclamation that was just wonderfully read by a generation of future leaders from our tribal communities and community partners. So Washington County Cultural Heritage Celebrations and Resources are a really important starting point for our collective organizational engagement and learning about equity, diversity, and inclusion. The Native American Heritage Month celebrations that we will enjoy this month have been planned and organized by a group of 8 staff who volunteered to support our learning in addition to their work. And this year, we are working in partnership with Clean Water Services and our Native American community leaders and community partners. And these cultural celebrations offer an opportunity to establish and maintain relationships with staff and community who identify as Native American and or Indigenous, to build trust and deepen our understanding of these diverse and growing communities in Washington County. Earlier today, Commissioner Rogers raised some important concerns when the board was discussing this evening's agenda and proclamation. And some of the language that we heard in the proclamation includes terms like colonialism, past oppression, white culture, discrimination, deprivation, violence, forced removal, and genocide. And Commissioner Rogers elevated a concern that these terms may be misperceived or considered to be divisive. And I guess I'd just like to add a small amount of context that helps underscore how these terms actually create an opportunity for us to reflect on the impact of historical and present day governmental practices from the perspectives of Indigenous tribes and communities. It is not just that tribal members experience difficulties. What they experienced was not accidental, it was intentional governmental policy. This began at the beginning of the United States, but in 1887, the federal government had an explicit policy to Americanize Indigenous people, systematically and forcibly removing youth from their families and sending them to Indian day schools or boarding schools, including, as was mentioned, the Forest Grove Indian training schools. As was mentioned, this was intentional to civilize people who were considered to be savage. And the policy and practice continued well into the 1900s. And we now know that these children, some in Oregon, but many across the country, were victims of physical, sexual, cultural, and spiritual abuse and neglect, and experienced treatment that in many cases constituted torture for resisting a policy of assimilation. Some children, we're now learning, died while in these Indian boarding schools, and many were buried in unmarked graves and remain accounted for today. Policies in the 1800s and early 1900s related to westward migration to Oregon and Washington County, including land grants and homesteading that many generational Oregonians benefit from today, cannot be separated from governmental policies that simultaneously removed Indigenous communities from tribal practices, sacred lands, economic vitality, and access to healthy food and medicine. And we see the public health impact in terms of hypertension, diabetes, addiction, and premature death in many Indigenous tribes. And we know this is tied to the experience of intergenerational, historical, and individual trauma. The Indian Termination Act of 1954, also mentioned in the proclamation, nullified numerous treaties that protected Oregon tribal rights to timber, water, oil, and other natural resources, and took a generation of struggle and legislative battles to reinstate tribes between 1977 and 1989 with the help of then Senator Marco Hatfield. This victory still came at a cost, as not all tribal lands were restored to the tribes, and there was no reparation for the economic devastation that termination caused. So imagine seeing, as probably many of the youth today see, your community stereotyped in old TV shows like The Lone Ranger, or movies like Dances with Wolves, or as mascots for high school, college, or professional sports teams, reinforcing perceptions of Indigenous people as savages, some of which are only being removed in the last few years, while tribal history still remains absent from school curricula. So if terms like colonialism and oppression are difficult to hear, I think we feel very humbled by the willingness of our tribal partners to share theirs and their tribe's experience of actually living through it. They invite us to imagine how communities have had to cope with severed family ties, indescribable pain and trauma, inexpressible loss of identity and connection, and immeasurable loss of generational health and wealth. This is not an act of finger pointing. It is an act of simply telling the truth from a perspective that our institutions have not taught many of us. Our leadership opportunity here is, like Senator Hatfield, then Governor Hatfield, to move through any feelings we may hold about people in our family or community may have benefited from policies that intentionally disenfranchised and traumatized Indigenous people. The policies are not our fault, but as leaders who have adopted a resolution focused on racial equity, you have called everyone in Washington County to instead reflect and thoughtfully consider whether or not our current policies and sentiments focus on partnership, support, healing, resilience, and the well-being of Native American tribes and Indigenous communities who are members of our Washington County community today, as well as to dismantle the vestiges of racism and white supremacy. So I want to appreciate our volunteers who read the proclamation and our staff who continue to work to provide deeper opportunities for learning. Again, we try the best we can in the month to present the fullest range of experiences for learning that everybody is welcome to lean into. And know that we don't always get it exactly right, but we welcome folks who have questions or are curious or want to do more deeper learning to reach out to us at OEICE or reach out to the planning committee. And I want to thank members of our committee who met over the past few weeks under the leadership of Christina Barboza, as well as our guests today, Gary Wesley, Kanaya, and Destiny Ketney, for your volunteering and leadership in reading our proclamation. And with that, I turn it over to you, Chair Harrington.
I would just encourage commissioners, if you'd like, to turn on your mics and clap if you would like. You know, I want, it's a little hard when we're not in a room together to express audibly our appreciation for your sharing, your history, your family's history, our community's history, that I know I, as a person who has only lived here in Oregon for just over 30 years, have not previously had the opportunity to learn more about. So thank you very much for joining us. Yes.
I would like to say thank you to all of you for sharing the proclamation reading. You did a great job with that, and it was moving. I appreciated the opening prayers and thoughts in your native language. You did a great job. You know, that's coming from someone who doesn't speak the language, but that doesn't mean that I could see it in your face, and I appreciated your willingness to be here with us, Gary. So thank you for that. And even though we're not into the Heritage Month yet, I do want to say thank you for being with us tonight, and I certainly learned a lot. I will continue to learn more. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll say a couple of things too, since my name was mentioned. Thank you all for being present. I'm a little embarrassed that you had to listen to a message that meant no disrespect or dishonor to anyone in any tribe. All of the atrocities that occur, I recognize. I don't tolerate it. I don't believe that any of that should have ever occurred. It's unfortunate. At the same time, I would expect many of you believe that we need to get to a position of trying to understand and to sympathize that not everyone maybe shares your and my respective beliefs, which I think are the same, and that we need to use less inflammatory language. We need to understand that things have gone by in the past, that today, in 2021, none of us tolerate or accept or agree that are permissible. The Grand Round tribes, really tribes, the single tribe, have done some fantastic charitable work here in the state of Oregon. Should be recognized for that. And my experiences with some elders at the tribe is that very fine, honorable, and good people. So I'm more for reconciling, more for attempting to say, let's move forward and recognize, not forget what's happened in the past, because it's not forgivable, but let's move forward in harmony as an inclusive group of human beings. So that was my intention of saying, can we somehow tailor some of the words differently so that we're all inclusive and we're not not trying to create any strife at all. So anyway, that's my comments. I'll be voting for the resolution, of course.
Commissioner Willie, go ahead.
Yes, and I'd just like to recognize Pam and I's administrative assistant, Megan, is a tribal member of the Cherokee Nation, and we honor her with this proclamation, and certainly want to say thank you, Megan, for representing your heritage. And we want to say a part of this proclamation goes to you. So thank you for that. And that makes it a little bit more personal, I think, to me and to Pam. So thank you.
And go ahead, Commissioner Fye.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming here and sharing this with us. I really appreciated hearing your prayer in your language as somebody who also speaks another language. I think it's important that we normalize speaking another language, and I really appreciate it. And this was a very well done proclamation. And Latricia, I want to appreciate your speech. It was very powerful, well needed to hear, and perfect timing. So thank you, and I look forward to partnering with our staff and our community to make Washington County a prosperous place for everyone and a safe place. Thank you.
And I'll just close out with thanking each of you, Ms. Tillman, for pulling this group together, and your leadership in guiding us to a better understanding and a better future for each person here in our community. Thank you, Christina, and to the other members of the Planning Commission. Kanaya and Destiny, as well as Gary, you are our future. We, as the 5 elected members of the Washington County Board of Commission, hope to be making decisions that will provide for you and other community members more opportunity, more health and wellness in the decades ahead. Decades that we probably will never see ourselves, but that we know there will be at least 6 generations ahead of us who will benefit from this. And with that, commissioners, do we have a motion to adopt this proclamation? We have a motion from Vice Chair Treese, and a second from Commissioner Willie. All those in favor of adopting this first ever Native American Heritage Month proclamation here in Washington County, please vote by saying aye or raising your hand. Thank you, commissioners. Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously 5-0. Thank you. And we look forward to learning more during the month of November 2021 as Native American Heritage Month moving forward.
Chair, if I could make a comment. Latricia, when I was commenting a few weeks ago about making our proclamations a little bit more personal, a little bit more emphatic, this is exactly what I had in mind. So thank you very much for having these students represent the proclamation. Certainly the prayer that we heard, this was exactly what I had in mind when I was talking about our proclamations need to be personal, and you did that. So thank you.
Did someone else wish to chime in? But I couldn't tell who.
1 second. I like to clarify. I'm not a student. I actually work for the Title VI program for the Beaverton School District. I did graduate from TSU, so I guess.
Well, I actually wasn't referring to you when I said students. The 2 young ladies there, but you're young enough to me to be a student. It's all relative.
Well, we are all lifelong learners, and Mr. Wesley, I appreciate that you are taking on additional languages. So thank you for being a student of your languages that you are hoping to foster and be more proficient in. But also thank you for sharing it with us tonight. All righty, thank you. Thank you too, Christina, for being here. I'm not sure if there was something you wanted to add to all of this or not.
Yeah, I just appreciate the opportunity to come forward before the board with Gary and our students to just share our proclamation, share our history, although uncomfortable, but it's facts, and this is just a step towards healing and moving forward in partnership. So we thank you for that.
Yes, thank you so much. All right, and with that, we'll move on to the next item on this evening's agenda, which is a presentation with our Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer, Ms. Latricia Tillman, with your quarterly report.
Great. Thank you so much again, Chair Harrington and board. Again, for the record, I am Latricia Tillman, Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer for Washington County, and I'm very excited to bring to you the fourth quarterly report, right, since I started here. So it's quite exciting to me, or maybe it's the third quarterly report, I lose track. But anyway, it has been a full year since I've been here. So very happy to bring forward this presentation to you, and I will be sharing the presentation with Amanda Garcia Snell. So if she is not currently on, if she could be presented or promoted, I guess, to be a presenter. And while that's happening, I can go ahead and start. And so if you'd like to move to the next slide. It's really important for me to begin with historical context, and this coming on the heels of the Native American Heritage Month proclamation, and just sort of reinforces the conversation that we had. Many times I've presented a slide like this that really only showed the experience of Black Americans from the period of time of the beginning of American slavery to the present, to sort of locate our work within the context of time, and to achieve equity in the outcomes that we are trying to achieve as a county. We have to be familiar with the roots and the causes of inequity. And when I look at this timeline, the way that it's evolved, I think of how long communities all over the globe have existed prior to the impact of colonialism and the institution of slavery. And when we think about equity, we have to think about history and historical legacy, historical trauma, and more importantly, it would behoove us to think about cultural strengths that have kept many of us here in spite of oppression for thousands of years, and how we have preserved community and resilience in the face of that oppression. So we recognize through what we are learning about the developmental origins of health and disease, that this history, trauma, and resilience is playing out in our bodies, in our organs, our hormones, our disease processes, as well as through our economy and every institution of government. And then we have to remember to bring forward the practices that have sustained oppressed and marginalized communities for actually millennia. So given this expanded view of human history, we can begin to think about the impact, the damage, the harm that has happened through those institutions and practices, and then think about how we can build up more equitable and sustainable practices more holistically. Next slide, please. So a little bit shorter timeline. This is just a reflection of how far we have come since you all adopted the equity resolution for Washington County. So it has just a few milestones that we've accomplished. So February was the adoption. You adopted a budget that created the Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement. I joined you last September. A year later, we launched our internal Equity Leadership Council, which have since brought forth our committees, where almost 100 staff are doing amazing work to bring equity, the equity resolution to life. We have adopted the Equity Action Plan, or you adopted the Equity Action Plan in August. And this fall, we plan to launch the first ever Washington County Budget Equity Tool. And then we are anticipating that at the 2-year anniversary of the adoption of the resolution, we will launch our Advisory Council on Racial Equity. So very exciting to report to you these milestones. Next slide. I just want to share that as we go forward, we are moving our organization into a significant change process. And so I just wanted to highlight this. This is something that we've also talked about as County Administrator Angie has been leading forward with Design the Future, that we are really moving into a large organizational change process. And oftentimes, large organizational changes come with challenges. There's always the hope, and then there's also the challenge that comes along with organizational change. And so people who may have supported work around equity without fully realizing how using an equity lens would impact the myriad ways the county does business, or the depth of reflection and learning it would require, may have some sense of the challenge of change. For some, change might usher in a honeymoon period where we celebrate change, but maybe also are simultaneously minimizing the extent of the workload that it will create. While for others, it might cause concern because ways of policy making or patterns or practices or thoughts are challenged. So that can lead to resistance. Some of the resistance may be to things like how we change how we start our meetings with relational time, how we pace our work, how we even write job descriptions. Because at the heart of change is how we structure our activities to engage people as equals, decentering our own story and our own experience and making room for multiple perspectives. So we see sort of that downshift in kind of a slowing of our performance or productivity, but when we can gel with the right tools and the right orientation around change, then we will see the work pick up. So we imagine at this point that we're in sort of that slowing down, reflecting, maybe in some cases redoing some things, unlearning as the period that we're in probably now for the next year plus. And we may revise that timeline as we know more over time. Next slide. So my approach to how we manage this work and how we're building out a culture within the Office of Equity and Inclusion, it harkens back to one of my favorite sort of leadership books, which is Good to Great. And at the heart of Good to Great is moving an organization that was good to an organization that's great are 3 concepts, which are disciplined people, disciplined thought, and disciplined action. And my mother would be so proud of me that I'm saying discipline so many times. That was her approach and philosophy. But in terms of disciplined people, we are staffing up with a great team who is committed to equity and community and have just demonstrated skill and success at advancing this work over a collective of many, many years. We have an Equity Leadership Council and its committees. So those leaders with a disciplined focus on equity, and then building out that Advisory Council on Racial Equity to engage that community perspective and community expertise. From disciplined thought, we're sort of in the early stages of that, and the first element of that is confronting the brutal facts. And I think with the proclamations, that's what we're doing. with some of the assessments. We're doing that as well, where we're looking at what are some of the gaps or strengths within the work that we're doing as our county wants to advance towards equity, identifying where we have work still to do. And so some of the work that has happened there that you all will hear a little bit more about is related to the ways that we're looking at data, specifically our demographics within our community participation organizations and our boards and commissions. And then discipline action is really about creating that culture of discipline, which is about how we start to roll out and use tools like the equity tool, how we use the community engagement best practices, like the ways that we're going to focus our budget town hall to center equity, the ways that our committees within the Equity Leadership Council are focusing. All of them, some have the name with best practice in them, but all of them are focusing on advancing best practice related to equity, diversity, and inclusion within the county. So that's really exciting to me. The next slide. So I just want you to see what you all have invested in, which is this amazing team within the Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement. We are organized into 2 teams, one focused on equity, diversity, and inclusion, and one focused on community engagement, but all of us working together towards a common vision and mission, and supported by our admin team, which is supporting our whole office. But wanted you to see just the amazing array of individuals, some who have been internally promoted to serve within the Office of Equity and Inclusion, and some who have joined over this past year to fill some of the vacancies that you all funded. We do still have a vacant equity data analyst. I think I led last year by saying I think that's going to be the hardest position to fill. And I'm very hopeful that some of your investments with the American Rescue Plan Act dollars around equity and data, and some of the work that's happening in partnership with our economic development manager and his focus on data, will be able to actually develop a equity data team, which should make that position a little bit easier to fill going forward. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Amanda Garcia-Snell, our Community Engagement Manager, to provide some of the updates and accomplishments of our community engagement team. And what you'll see is sort of a cadence of regular updates on specific metrics, which is really important to us to be able to show how the work that you're supporting and leading is leading to results over time. So, Amanda?
Great, thanks, Latricia. Hi, good evening. Amanda Garcia-Snell, Community Engagement Manager, as Latricia had mentioned. So next slide, please. And you can go to the next slide, actually. So this slide is a fancier version of a similar slide that you've seen before, or that we brought to you before. But essentially, these are the touch points for community engagement for people in the county. So lots of opportunities aside from constituent emails or public testimony. There are many other opportunities for people to engage with you, the board, and then departments in the county. Next slide. So this slide is an updated version of what we have brought to you, what I had brought to you the last quarterly update. So you can see that the green are the attendance data for this year for the different town hall and engagement events, and then the whitish color are from 2020. So the most recent update here is for September, the last quarterly town hall. And for that, we had 42 people in attendance on Zoom and 46 people watching on YouTube. Next slide, please. So this, we have really benefited from one of our staff, Carol Renault, who has some graphic talents. And so this is similar information that I've shared in the past, but it just looks so much nicer. So this is the demographic data that we collect for the boards and commissions applications. And so the baseline that we started with, we had 13% of people providing demographic data, and in July we had 83%. Oops, and I just lost. And then in October we had 95% of people provided demographic data. We had fewer applications in October, down to 22, but that is our lowest recruitment of the year. There are the fewest number of boards and commissions have vacancies in October, so we expect to see that go down, and then we will most likely see the numbers come back up for January. Next slide, please. So this slide really shows a comparison for quarter 1, quarter 2, and quarter 3. And so these are in both tables that we see, as I mentioned in the last slide, there are fewer people leaving demographic questions. Oh, I didn't mention that, but in this this most recent recruitment, we had fewer people answering the demographic questions, but still pretty high number in comparison to the baseline. So, and we had fewer people leaving demographic questions blank, which is pretty exciting. So in the age category, we have, these are the following years of birth that are listed. And so this is the percentage of people that answered that this was their birth year. So we can see that there was an increase in people born in the 1930s. We had a decrease of people born in the 1950s, which is actually good in the sense that the majority of current members are born in the 1950s, current members of boards and commissions. So it's nice to see the categories level a bit. And then conversely, a decrease of applicants born in the 1970s, which is, I was born in the 70s, so sad to see that, but a really nice bump of people born in the 80s. And so that's telling us that younger people are participating, and always exciting to see that people born in the 90s are interested in applying to boards and commissions. So in the table on the right, race and ethnicity, we saw a decrease in applicants that identify as Asian, and unfortunately no applicants that identify as Black for this quarter 3. But there was a bump in applicants that identified as 2 or more races, and so potentially there's some inclusion there. And then very little change in applicants who identified as Latinx or white. Next slide, please. So this slide overlays the 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2021 CPO attendance data. And it really, we continue to see the similar pattern of engagement in CPO meetings as we have in past years, with, of course, the exception of 2020. But you can see that we have higher engagement in the beginning of the year. We see a dip in summer, and then people attend in the fall, but not as many as earlier in the year, and then a dip at the holidays. Next slide, please. So these are some of the things that are happening with this community participation organizations that we call CPOs and boards and commissions. So some foundational changes, with community participation organizations. We are starting to really think about looking at that program, modernizing some of that work, and really thinking about how we could do things differently. So this is, we're continuing to provide administrative support and EDI support to in both instances, to community participation organs and boards and commissions, but we are diving deeper. And so for foundational changes with community participation organizations, we continue to hear from CPO members that they're interested in change and improvement and how the program is operated. And we as staff feel this too. The CPO program is based on a 35-year-old resolution and order, and we are beginning to think about what it might involve and mean to update or revise that resolution and order. In addition to that, we have been interested in and are hearing from community that the boundaries need to be evaluated and potentially modernized as CPO boundaries. So we would like to level them a bit if possible, align them with your district boundaries. I think as you hopefully all know, the CPO boundaries do not align with your district boundaries. And so once the redistricting or reapportionment process is complete, then we're on the rolling agenda to come to your board in December to start talking about this, some potential changes for the community participation organization, seek your guidance around that. Foundational changes related to boards and commissions. So while we have been focusing on equity considerations in the bylaws, more recently through the Equity Leadership Council Committee, staff are developing priority focus areas for boards and commissions. And this is still a big work in progress, but some of the things that staff are starting to consider are standards across the organization for boards and commissions, accessibility considerations, that ties into our language accessibility plan, and then info that is available to the public. So where is the info? Is it the same for all the boards and commissions? Easy to find, that type of thing. And then onboarding for new members and some application improvements. It's lots of exciting work, and I think it could really have an impact on this level of engagement as we start to think about boards and commissions. Next slide. So civic leaders, when I came to you in the last quarter, we thought we would not have a cohort this year. We would look at an RFP process, and like so many things, that changed a little bit. So slight changes in the next phase. We wound up launching a 7th cohort. I actually just came from that meeting there. Hopefully some civic leaders watching this meeting now. We're in our this is the second week, and as Commissioner Fye mentioned, she came to the to present on Monday. So that 7th cohort, we had heard from community and from our community partner, Adelante Mujeres, that there were lots of people that were interested in a cohort, and since we weren't ready to go yet with the RFP, which we are now considering as an RFPQ, we decided to do this one cohort. So as I had mentioned previously, we really appreciate the long collaboration that we have had with Adelante, but after 5 years, we are thinking that it's worth evaluating the program a little deeper and really looking at what, what other ways we might be able to have the program be really responsive to emergent topics in the county, and really work in partnership with our community-based organizations. And so we are now considering a request for programmatic qualifications, or an RFPQ, instead of a request for proposal. And this could potentially allow us to be a little more nimble with our civic leadership training. So hopefully I'll have more to report on that in the next quarter. Next slide, please. So department engagement. As we continue to work, we have a couple of areas of department engagement. So as we continue to work on culturally specific relationship building, we're pleased to announce that we are sending out a weekly digest of engagement opportunities. And so that is the community partner update. We're in our this will be our 3rd week, and so we've been getting a really good response. We send it to our vast list of community partners that has grown to over 400 contacts, and so we're hoping that has a pretty wide reach in terms of making sure that community partners are aware and sharing with their networks and their constituents opportunities where people can engage in decisions that impact them. The budget equity focused town hall is coming in on December 2nd, and it'll be an interactive event. We're very excited about that. It'll be in the evening, and we are looking at utilizing a new type of software so that we could do a really interactive event in a virtual setting. And so more details to come on that. The ARPA cross-jurisdictional community engagement is an opportunity to really collaborate across the county with jurisdictions to ensure best practices around community engagement when in relation to the ARPA funding. And then other department support, we're continuing to support several departments in addition to the usual that we've been working with for quite some time, like land use and transportation, housing in the sheriff's office, and health and human services. More recently, we've been working with community development and to brainstorm with them about manufactured housing. And then the Juvenile Justice Department, as we are partnering with them as a participant on a project they were recently awarded from the Center for Juvenile Justice Reform. It's focused on equity and well-being of youth of color. And so that's a new area for us, as it's exciting. And then we are working with support services more recently to develop a compensation policy for our community, so that as we are asking people to share their expertise with us in a variety of engagement projects, we can really appreciate and value their time through some type of compensation. And those then are what I have for community engagement. Back to you, Latricia.
Oh, so we're not done for questions yet. Okay, got it.
Well, I'm wondering when do we, I mean, there was several questions I have for this particular segment. I'm willing to wait till we get to the end if that's what you would prefer.
I'm happy to answer community engagement questions. I'll leave it up to you. Sorry, I was having some tech difficulties, so I couldn't see very much as I was talking to you. I didn't notice if you had, if you're giving the question sign, so apologies.
No, I wanted to let you get through the whole program, but again, Latricia, if you would prefer to finish up the presentation and then we come back, I'm perfectly willing for that too. So you make the call.
Why don't I go ahead and finish up? There's a few more slides that I can go through fairly quickly, and then open it up to the present or questions across the presentation. In the next slide, there's a couple of updates relative to our Equity Leadership Council. This work takes a little bit more time to just seed and nurture and grow. And so I believe in 2022, we'll have quite a lot more interaction with the board individually on various policy items that you identified as priorities. Within our Equity Leadership Council committees, we are bringing forward to the Equity Leadership Council a draft policy on employee resource groups. And so that would be something that would come once it has the input from the Equity Leadership Council forward to the board for your consideration. And then we are also co-developing between OEIC staff and our Equity Policy Committee the budget equity tool, which we will begin to do training on in November alongside the other trainings that happen in our budget process. And then, as you may recall, when Jack Leon was providing an overview of the time frame, that training will also come to the board and the budget committees later in the spring as you start making your deliberations around budget. Next slide. I'm just going to say a little bit more about the budget equity tool. We are piloting it in several program areas, both service delivery related and also internally focused, operationally related areas. And then the other piece that we're continuing to move forward with is the conversation we had started in the past budget cycle around building equity into the discretionary investments that come before the board as well within the budget process. The next slide focuses on some of our work relative to civil rights. So we are very happy to be working in partnership with our Chief HR Officer, Eva Levante, and Tom Carr, County Council, and their staff to help assure a full and robust, transparent, and consistent process for preventing discrimination and harassment in the workplace. And so some of that will look like improvement in complaint procedures and processes, and policy updates that reflect both the creation of the Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement and a new executive leadership structure. The other piece around civil rights that we continue to work very much in partnership with staff across the county on is the limited English assistance policy. and we are now working on the implementation plan, which we anticipate bringing to the board for adoption in early 2022, which is right around the corner. Next slide is focused on a partnership that is very new with us right now with again, Chief HR Officer Eva Labonte and her talent acquisition team under the new leadership of Carlton Babbage, which is very exciting. We are looking at how we can partner through a strategic investment into training and capacity building for our talent acquisition team. Which would support them to address structural barriers to inequity in our hiring process. And so some of the areas that we're wanting that partnership and that capacity building training to focus on is really supporting hiring managers, some of whom are not totally understanding of how different positions may benefit from a diversity recruitment strategy. Thinking about how we write position descriptions and job postings to be more engaging. And also thinking about things like proactive sourcing of diverse candidates, maybe people who aren't looking at our website, maybe not even be considering a new job, but they are the candidate that we want to actually recruit, or multiple candidates we want to recruit to consider coming to work at Washington County. So that will be really exciting to come back and share some of the progress we make there. Next. And as you all are very well aware, we are working on how can we measure our progress relative to procurement equity. So there are a couple of different systems that we use to identify COVID firms. So within Wizard, we have 33 COVID certified firms, but Procure Now, which is a bigger system, has 154 certified suppliers registered. Being registered in our system or registered in Procure Now, that doesn't necessarily mean we're doing business with them. So a lot of our effort is on doing more matchmaking between folks who are purchasing services within the county and people who can provide those services. Our COVID spend amount has increased, as it will every year as we pay more invoices. What's I think notable is that we are now adjusting down in terms of our current spend percentage. So in July, we were at 3% of just under 3% of spend of all contracts, and now we're down to less than 1%. So this is really our first time watching how we do in terms of our procurement equity work for a full year. So we're considering this our baseline year and expecting that some of the changes that we'll be seeing will hopefully make those numbers trend upward going forward. Next slide shares some of the activities that our supplier diversity coordinator, Kitty Kong, has been engaged in. So really working with our procurement manager for equity and procurement policy updates, which will be coming forward to you for adoption in January. You sort of got a preview about that last spring, and so ideally adoption will happen early in 2022. Been very actively involved in conversations around the Construction Career Pathways project. And then we're doing various community engagement events, as well as working to support departments in their efforts to build out their procurement equity processes as well. Next slide, I just wanted to highlight the amazing work that's happening within the ARPA work that you're leading and how you centered the value of racial equity. And we are connecting the work going forward with the COVID Racial Equity Work Group, which was established in a partnership with OEICE and Health and Human Services. And so they'll be broadening out from a response-focused racial equity approach to a recovery focused racial equity approach, and will be a source of input, guidance for the ways that we build out our response work. Our approach is also multi-jurisdictional. We've been partnering and thinking about how equity can be centered in our community engagement around the American Rescue Plan Act with the city of Hillsboro and the city of Beaverton, and made a presentation to the other city managers. And so there may be some other cities that join us in this approach. And the baseline agreement that we are all agreeing to as part of this multi-jurisdictional partnership is that we're all centering equity, and we are all wanting to adopt community engagement best practices and policy. And we are really excited that that will help us to set a new trajectory even beyond the end of the ARPA funding cycle. So that's really exciting. And then the final update slide is focused on the External Advisory Council for Racial Equity. Are continuing to engage with community partners. I think the last time we were here, we were talking about meeting with community partners. We've since had 2 planning meetings to identify community recommendations for how to establish an equitable partnership focused on equity. And so we have 2 more planning meetings prior to the launch. We are asking community partners to help us identify what they would recommend to be the scope within the Advisory Council for Racial Equity, which we will then, of course, bring back to you for your consideration of those recommendations as well as your own recommendations. But since these are individuals who get tapped to serve on multiple equity-focused advisory boards, we really wanted to tap in and learn from their experiences, their expertise, what has worked well in the past, and where potential pitfalls and challenges have been, so that we can avoid those. So we've been really happy and enjoyed those planning conversations where not only are we inviting those community partners into the table, we're actually asking them to help us construct and design the table. And so that concludes our updates. There's so much more that we could share, but we recognize as the office continues to grow and evolve, we don't want our quarterly reports to go on and on and on. And so we try to keep it to a high level, but of course we are always here and available to answer any questions or engage in discussion and dialogue with you as well.
Thank you, Ms. Tillman and Ms. Garcia-Snell. Commissioners, what questions and comments do you have? And just a heads up, you may have to bring the presentation back. Go ahead, Commissioner Willie.
Well, I'm thinking that there are a number of questions that I have, and so I'm wondering if maybe I should just ask for a meeting with Tricia and Amanda to go over some specifics and just to give you, some insight as to where I'm going here, because I can't even find the slide that I wanted to look at. But regarding the CPOs, as I've said before, the CPOs in my district have basically not started up. I would love to see kind of a redo of maybe combining a couple of them. Do we need one in Cornelius and do we need one in Forest Grove? The North Plains one seems to be the most active, but none of them have started up again with the pandemic. So kind of need to find out what the plan of action is there and what kind of, I guess, assistance that we're providing with them to get started, and maybe, quite frankly, to be a little stronger. I've been to the Forest Grove one. There was 3 people there. I've been to the Cornelius one, a little stronger attended, but still not significant. So I'd love to see those programs enhanced and how we're going to go about doing that. The Civic Leadership Program, we are launching the 7th cohort. I'd like to see the demographics of the first 6 cohorts. And so when you say considering a civic leader's request for programmatic qualifications, I'd like to know what that is, what that means, what's the changes that you anticipate we're going to need to do. And so I'd like to have more details on that. And you know, I don't know if this is fair or not, but you know, the chair announced earlier that you know, her and Commissioner Treese and Commissioner Fye have been invited to speak at these things. I didn't know it was a women's only club. So, you know, I'd like to think that, you know, there may be other opportunities. So with that, again, we talk about shifting again to the civil rights slide. I have some questions about that. And others. So I guess I will say, Latricia, could I circle back with you and Amanda and have a more in-depth conversation about this presentation, about where we're going?
Absolutely. Thank you for your question, Commissioner Willen. We're happy to meet with you anytime, and I believe your invitation to the Civic Leader Cohort 7 will be coming soon.
I kind of figured I'd guilt you into that was the purpose, but thank you for that.
We are thrilled that you are interested and know that you have a lot to share.
I would just like to clarify that I think my attendance at the Civic Leaders came, you invited us all to come to graduation.
2019.
And I went to a couple of them. So to Commissioner Willie's point, it was a women's only RSVP.
Yes.
No, I attended those. The comment was to speak at those. So I've attended those. They're
but
great.
We all spoke at those, Jerry. That's what they were talking about. So I just you're not going to get away with that one, Commissioner Willie. Sorry. So are you? Excuse me. Did I interrupt you, Jerry? Did you have anything more? Okay. I just wanted to comment quickly. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the thorough nature of the presentation. I think that the CPO piece is particularly interesting to me because I think that the CPOs that are most active right now are in District 2. I believe that that's correct. And I know that I want to continue to be involved with what the thoughts are as we move forward. And I have been, I just am raising my hand saying, I really want to continue to be involved in that. And as far as the Civic Leaders program goes, one of the things that I've been thinking about in relationship to that program is how do we, I'm not sure we interface, and correct me if I'm wrong, with other organizations within Washington County that have leadership opportunities. You know, do we interface with THPRD with these people? Do we interface with the different school districts? How do we, we've built such a great repertoire of our participants. How are we looking to further opportunities within Washington County in organizations that we support? So I just wanted to throw that out as well. But thank you for your presentation and for the work that you're doing. It's great work. There's a lot of it, and it's a long road, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I just want to comment, Pam, that I'm jealous of your CPO activity. That's what I'd like to see a little bit more out in my district.
I'll just say thank you, Commissioner Treese, for your comment. And we have had some conversations with the City of Beaverton. They also do a civic leader type program. And what we're seeing is that some of the folks that we're engaging with on civic leaders, they might end up providing their input in civic leadership opportunities to the cities, and some of the cities' leadership program graduates may be putting their name in for some of our county boards and commissions. So there is an ecosystem that we're contributing to, and we're looking forward to making that more robust.
That's great. Thank you.
I would also just add on to that, those of us that coordinate civic leadership programs, so the cities and then Virginia Garcia had one and some other organizations that also have them. We meet maybe quarterly to talk about ways that we can collaborate, and we share opportunities with one another. And so really trying to encourage some cross pollination, as Latricia mentioned.
Commissioner Fire, Commissioner Rogers, did you have any questions or comments for this evening? Okay.
Well, great job. Good job. That's all I can. And thank you for all your work. Latricia, you're 2 for 2 tonight. Great presentations and great discussions. Commissioner Willie, I do quarterly civic engagement myself with elected officials. You're more than welcome to speak up mine.
Okay, so I'll close it up. I want to thank you for presenting the quarterly update in this evening's board meeting. It's been a pleasure to have you present in prior work sessions, but I really think it helps our community see the advancements that we are making and that we are investing in to ensure that we have a good set of programs here in the agency as we more intentionally go about our work of serving the community. And I'm also really grateful, Ms. Tillman and Ms. Garcia-Snell, and to the members of your teams for taking us on this journey of improvement. I'll say, you know, you never know where you're going to find inspiration, but I feel totally comfortable with every member of your team. You know, Ty and Marcus, I'll be in events, and boy, I know I am in really awesome hands. They'll take me on journeys. And what I mean by that journey, I don't always know where a meeting will take me in terms of my learnings or engagement with the community, but I'm always comfortable that it will be a positive interaction. And I really appreciate that. It's not just that they help make it a welcoming experience, but I don't know, maybe a safe learning environment, I guess, is a better way for me to put it. Let's see. On when Ms. Tillman, when you were showing us that equity timeline of where we've come over the last year plus, you came back to C2P2 later. I believe we're adopting that policy on November 30th. And to me, that's another, both updating our procurement practices and C2P2. To me, those are policy decisions that we made in order to be more intentional in operationalizing equity. So it was just a comment. That timeline made me think of those. And on one of the community engagement slides, it was titled Department Engagement. And it talked about our board town hall on December 2nd, how we've pivoted it to make sure that we're going on this budget exploration together. And then the next one that was on ARPA. I never thought of the board as a department before, and used that department support in another slide. And it made me realize that, that's kind of inside language. We're an agency. And what you're doing is you're supporting that agency. It's agency engagement, right? So, and just a comment there. that we've broken through to improve, modernize our culture. We talk more and we see cross-functional teams a lot. And so I feel like we are that one Washington County, right? So it just struck me, that's all. So lastly, just thank you for what you're doing each and every day, each and every week. You're helping us as a board do a better job in our role in serving the community and helping all of us as one Washington County get better and better in that public service. So thank you. And I know you work with Clean Water Services too, so that there's a good partnership and learning opportunities there. So I really appreciate that. So thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
All righty, so that was the presentation section of this evening's meeting. And were there any last, before they went away, were there any last questions or comments on that topic? Nope, okay. So we'll move on to boards and commissions. This evening, we have a proposal to appoint Peter Pastors and Hannah Carlson to the Garbage and Recycling Advisory Committee for a term ending March 31st, 2025, and Myra Hernandez for a term ending March 31st of 2026. What are the wishes of the commission with regard to these appointments?
Motion to approve requested action.
Thank you, Commissioner Willie, for the motion. Do we have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Rogers. All those in favor, please vote by raising your hand or saying aye. Thank you, commissioners. Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously 5-0. Next, we'll move on to public hearings. First, do we have a motion to read by title only engrossed ordinance number 877? We have a motion from Commissioner Willie. Do we have a second? Second from Commissioner Fye. All those in favor of reading this by title only, please vote by saying aye or raise your hand. Thank you, commissioners. Any opposed? Thank you. Mr. Tom Carr, could you please read this by title only? He's looking for the mute.
No, I'm looking for the ordinance. It doesn't seem to be in the packet materials. Let me see if I can find it.
It's item G1. It might be near page 67 of 310 or somewhere.
Yeah, I've got it. Thank you. Sorry.
Gotcha.
A engrossed ordinance 877, an ordinance addressing minor amendments to the Community Development Code affecting certain rural land use districts to align certain code sections with the state statute.
Thank you. And we'll have a brief staff report first. Hello, Mr. Roberts. Oh, and I see more of your team members, Teresa Cherniak, Mr. Andy Back, and Corinne Arendez.
Indeed. Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. Corinne's actually going to walk us through a fairly brief staff report tonight, and then we'll be asking you to continue for one more engrossment hearing on November 2nd. Thank you. Oh, I think you're muted, Corinne.
Good evening. I was looking for my notes and the screen has gone really large. I apologize for this. I can see myself. I cannot see the presentation or my PowerPoint notes. Is the presentation up for other people?
Yes, it is. We're on the title page.
Excellent. Well, we'll start there and I will wing it without notes. So I am Karina Rendies, Associate Planner with Community Planning, here to bring you the staff report for A engrossed ordinance number 877-A. Next slide, please. So want to bring you folks up to speed as to where we are in the process and provide just a quick overview of where we're at. The Minor Community Development Code, or CDC, amendments proposed in this ordinance are intended to provide consistency with state law. These updates were authorized in 2021-22 Long Range Planning Work Program by your board. There was a need to identify changes at our, as discussed at our previous hearing. Some changes were identified by the Department of Land Conservation and Development staff, and therefore county staff made some changes to the ordinance that we brought to Planning Commission, and they supported those and recommended that your board go ahead and engross that ordinance, which you did so by taking action on October 5th, the last time I presented. Next slide. So these changes are really limited in scope. They address uses in our resource districts, which is our agricultural and forest AF20, exclusive farm use, and exclusive forest and conservation districts. And these particular districts, the allowed uses are identified in the ORS Chapter 215. So again, very limited in scope, just aligning with changes in state law. Next slide, please. And so just a short summary on just the changes that were identified. They affected only uses that are allowed in the EFU and AF20 land use districts. So first, temporary portable on-site septic treatment facilities. We added a clarification that septic application is limited to these certain farm uses. And then second, for the school expansions, we did add the qualifier that in order to expand, the schools must be established prior to January 1, 2009. Third, we revised the square footage slightly for processing facilities to say less than 10,000 square feet. Next slide. So tonight, staff's recommendation is that you conduct the first of two required public hearings on the engrossed ordinance, and at the conclusion of public testimony, continue the hearing to a second hearing on November 2nd. And with that, I'm available if your board has any questions.
Commissioners, do you have any questions on this evening's staff report? I know we've been over this topic previously. Okay. Seeing none, I'd like to open a public hearing. Clerk Moss, do we have anyone signed up or who would like to testify at this evening's public hearing on A engrossed ordinance 877?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have no one signed up. If any member of the public wishes to provide public testimony, please use the raise your hand function. I'll give you just a moment to do so. Not seeing any hands, Madam Chair.
All righty, then with that, I will close the public hearing. Do we have a motion to continue the public hearing to next Tuesday, November 2nd, 2021? We have a motion from Commissioner Treese, a second from Commissioner Rogers. All those in favor, please vote by saying aye or raise your hand. Thank you, commissioners. Anyone opposed? The motion carries unanimously 5-0. So we'll come back to this next Tuesday. Thank you. And we're on to our second and last public hearing for this evening. And this one is related to our own agency personnel rules and regulations. And with that, I would like to welcome Ms. Eva Labonte, our Chief Human Resources Officer.
Thank you, Chair Harrington, and nice to see you this evening, and hello to the rest of the commissioners. I am here for the public hearing on changes that we're proposing for the personnel rules and regulations. In your packet, you will see a list of the changes highlighted in red, and then a clean copy, which is sometimes easier to read. I did want to go over some of the highlights of the changes that we've made. There's nothing that is overly unusual, but I do want to highlight some of the changes just so everyone's aware of what they are. One of the biggest things we did was to go through and change some of the titles that are related to Design the Future. So for example, Human Resources Division is referred to many times in there, which is now the Department of Human Resources. So we needed to make that change. And we are always looking for grammatical changes and ways that we can make this easier for people to understand. We want our employees to, be able to read the personnel rules and understand how these apply to them. So we're always looking for those types of changes. And along those lines, in Article 2, there was some confusion sometimes when you read it about who can authorize reclassifications. So those are, for an example, if someone is in an Analyst 1 level position, they're working in an Analyst 2 level, the County Administrative Office approves that change, Human Resources approves it, and then it is officially approved by the Chief Human Resources Officer. So we just made that clarification in some of the language. Under recruitment in Article 4, we made a change to the county-only recruitments. This does not happen very often that we hold a county-only internal recruitment. We most often go out for external recruitments. But currently, the personnel rules indicated that only regular employees could apply for those positions where we do have enough internal candidates to have a competitive process inside. We changed it to all employees. So this includes our limited duration positions, our variable hour, and our temporary employees. We made this change because we often have a very diverse group of people who are in those positions. And we feel that when they're serving the community and doing great work for our organization, if there's a competitive process internally, they should have the ability to compete for those positions as well. So that's a change that we're proposing to make. We changed under Article 4.5.6, limited duration. Those are positions that are typically outside funded or very specific funding sources. They were listed as a 3-year position maximum, and sometimes those positions actually have funding that goes more than 3 years. So we changed it to when the funding ends, then the position, limited duration position ends, just to clarify that. Another change we made under Article 7, under sick leave, we added that if people come to work with a communicable disease, we are expecting that they will use their professional judgment and not report to the workplace. And if they do, and their supervisor believes that they need to go home, this is a practice we've had, but it's not in the rules, where we can send people home and we pay them regular wages for the rest of the day. So we wanted to put that in the rules so people were aware of it and that we had something to refer to. And we clarified that this provision only applies for the first day of a multi-day illness. And we're really excited about the last change I wanted to bring forward, which was adding Juneteenth as a paid holiday for Washington County. As we all know, President Biden recognized it as a federal holiday, but this would recognize it at Washington County as a paid day off for all of our employees. And if they are required to work on that day, then they would, of course, have another day off to celebrate. So those are the highlights, and we're requesting that we have a public hearing and after public testimony that you would adopt these changes to the personnel rules and regulations.
First, are there any board questions or comments that you would like to raise? Go ahead, Commissioner Willie.
So how many paid days off do we authorize?
That's a good question. I don't have it off the top of my head. It is the standard holidays that we have. We do recognize Veterans Day, which some organizations don't, and that's an important one. I can look up while we're talking to figure out how many there are.
I believe it's at least 10.
Yeah.
So not that I'm opposed to this, but we authorize another paid day off. What's that cost the organization?
Typically, what you're looking at is some overtime costs for positions that have to be have mandatory staffing. So that's the cost for adding a holiday. And of course, there's always productivity. We feel we're proposing it because we feel it's very important to recognize this date. But there is a slight overtime cost for those positions that do have to be filled.
I don't disagree. I think it's an important day too, is that I'm not sure that there aren't trade-offs in this. I mean, I think we as a commission should authorize a number of paid days off. And if you want a different one, then you trade. I don't think it's, again, our budget's tight enough already. Our staff work very, very hard, and I understand that. We get the job done. But I think it's our responsibility also to be prudent about the number of days off we authorize without just a blanket, okay, it sounds good.
Understood. Commissioner Treese.
I thought we already authorized this.
We did through one of our labor agreements.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I'm confused. Thank you.
I would make a comment. Jerry's bringing up a good point. I mean, there is productivity and other costs. I have no issue with holiday either. I just think about it, we trade it. Let's pick one and trade it out. That would be my preference.
Thank you. I'm very comfortable with moving forward with these rules and regulations as proposed at this stage, but I'll leave my comments until after the public hearing as well. Any other questions before we have the public hearing? Okay, so with that, I'll open a public hearing. Clerk Moss, do we have anyone signed up to testify or wanting to testify on this matter right now?
We have no one signed up. Would any members of the public wish to provide public testimony on this item? Please utilize the raise your hand function. I'll give you just a moment. Not seeing any hands, Madam Chair.
All righty. So with that, I'll close the public hearing. What are the wishes of the commission with regard to this resolution and order to amend the personnel rules and regulations? Is there a motion?
I make a motion that we postpone the decision on this until we have clarification on the number of holidays we are authorizing.
And I can let you know there's 10. I did look it up while we were talking.
And this would make 11.
Correct.
Okay. I still think we need to postpone the discussion on this, considering that this is new information to me.
So we have a motion from Commissioner Willie. Do we have a second? We have a second from Commissioner Rogers. All those in favor of this motion to postpone, please vote by raising your hand or saying aye. Thank you, commissioners. Any opposed? Aye. Commissioner Fye, would you care to vote?
Yeah, I do want to vote. I think I have a question. Are you questioning? Well, okay. I'm trying to understand some of the concerns from Commissioner Willie. Are you trying to figure out how to delicately ask? Are you wondering if we should reduce the number of holidays from? So what is your concern from going from 10 to 11 now?
We haven't been advised as to what the overall cost of that is to the organization. When we give 2,200 employees an additional day off, there's a cost to that. And I just want to know what that is And if we have, as a commission, agreed that we're going to give 10 paid holidays, then we're agreeing that now we're going to say there's 11 paid holidays. And I just want us to do that eyes wide open.
Commissioner Trace?
Wait 1 second. Mr. Carr, following Robert's Rules of Order, we're back to discussion. What do you recommend we do at this stage?
So there's a motion, a second, and a motion on the floor. You can debate and then call the question and vote.
Okay.
Well, you started to vote, but
yeah, that's why I was asking.
Yeah, but I don't think you want to preclude debate.
Right. Go ahead, Commissioner Treese.
Thank you, Chair. I actually went through a very similar situation when I was working for Pacific Corps. We added Martin Luther King Day. It was a long time ago, but we did go through that, and there was a recognized cost, but also there was a huge recognized benefit to doing it. So I think that it's not just, when you look at these things, it's not just about the cost, but it's about the recognition that the organization is making regarding the significance of the day. And so I just want to get that out there too, that we're not, when we authorize Veterans Day, it's the significance of Veterans Day. When we authorize President's Day, it's the significance of the presidents. So I'm just saying that I don't believe this is a cost only discussion. I do agree that we don't have quite enough information to move forward. I'm happy with postponement, but I feel very strongly that we're doing this for, if we choose to do this, we're doing this for a reason that isn't just cost. And when we have a federally authorized holiday, it's there's a lot of significance there. So I'm just getting that out on the table as well.
And I don't disagree with anything that you just said, Pam. This is not totally about just money and anything else. It's just this information wasn't provided. So that's what I'm asking. Time to do that.
I'm comfortable learning more, but I feel pretty strongly that it's not just about the money, like I said.
I would chime in, Commissioner Fye. You asked me the question, and I was listening to Commissioner Willie, and I concur that we just need more information. So I'm not opposed to holiday at all. I would, if I had my brother, we'd probably trade it out for some other holiday, so we'd still have 10. But that would be my thought.
Commissioner Fye, do you have anything more you'd like to add?
No, I like to cast my vote now. I'm ready. I'm sorry.
So hang on. Let's end discussion first. I'll add that I've been through this process before, through public sector and private sector, and I understand costs and benefits already, and I don't think there's a need to trade this out myself. So I just myself don't have a need for postponing it. I think there's a lot of other work to take care of and move on. So now that we've all had a chance for additional discussion, Commissioner Willie has a motion to postpone, as seconded by Commissioner Rogers. We'll take the vote again. All those in favor, please vote by saying aye or raise your hand. Thank you, commissioners. Any opposed? The motion passes 4-1. So this topic will be rescheduled to come back to us at some future date. All right, that's it for our 2 items under public hearings. We don't have any standalone action items, so that brings us to our second public communications section. Clerk Moss, do we have anyone signed up to testify this evening or wishing to now?
We do, Madam Chair. We have Jonathan Pawlowski. Jonathan, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you.
Please go ahead for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Harrington, Commissioners. My name is Jonathan Polonsky. I serve as President and CEO of Plaid Pantry. While I understand Ordinance 878 is not included on tonight's agenda, I wanted to take this opportunity to again discuss with you the ordinance as well as a potential amendment with respect to public health. As you are well aware, those engaged in the retail section within Washington County remain strongly opposed to Ordinance 878 moving forward in its current form. Without question, if advanced and ultimately approved, the impacts of the ordinance will result in job losses and revenue losses. As previously stated, operating margins are narrow. Some retailers will lose their businesses entirely. Significant retail sales will migrate to locations outside of Washington County. There was an opportunity to achieve some middle ground with respect to the issue of protecting our youth from the use of tobacco, electronic cigarettes, and vaping. I believe this opportunity still exists. However, the Commission decided to narrowly advance an amended ordinance that would ban all flavored tobacco products based on the belief it is best for public health. Once again, I strongly urge the Commission members to thoroughly review the amendments put forth by Commissioner Willie. Those amendments, in conjunction with the work being done at the state and federal levels, address minors' access to vaping products and the overall public health within the county. Please take a look at current information available through the National Youth Tobacco Survey. In essence, the use of traditional tobacco products continues to decline. However, the use of e-cigarettes and associated vaping products remains a significant issue. Approximately 85% of minors using e-cigarettes or vaping products indicated they preferred flavored products. The Willie amendments address these issues head on. Absent consideration of those amendments, I would ask the Commission at the very least to incorporate an amendment recognizing the ongoing review by the FDA's pre-market tobacco application process, or PMTA. The PMTA process requires that a vaping product must provide scientific data that demonstrates it is, in quote, appropriate for the protection of public health, end quote. To date, the FDA is 98% through this application process, and it has banned over 1 million products that have not shown protection to the public health. Following research and a comprehensive review of products, the FDA has determined there is a health benefit provided by the allowance of certain products to remain in the market under the premise of harm reduction. If certain products are used rather than traditional products, overall public health will improve. I think it would be prudent for Washington County to allow any product that has gone through the approval process to continue to be sold in the county. What would the argument to not allow those products be? In the event the Commission takes action to advance the current ordinance, I strongly encourage the incorporation of an amendment exempting those specific products that have gone through the PMT process and have been allowed by the FDA to stay on the market. Please consider a clarifying amendment to the ordinance that recognizes the PMT process. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Madam Chair, we have no one else signed up, nor do I see any members of public online.
Thank you, Clerk Moss. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Polonsky, for joining us this evening and hanging in there late into the evening. The next item on the agenda is board announcements. And per usual, I'll announce our upcoming meetings. In the month of November, next Tuesday, we have a work session that will begin at 8:30 in the morning. Then at 10 o'clock, we'll start with the monthly Housing Authority board meeting, followed by our Board of Commissioners meeting subsequent to that, usually around 10:30. sometimes it goes longer. We have a work session on Thursday, November 4th, that'll start at 9. Then on Tuesday, November 9th, we'll have a work session that starts at 8:30, board meeting at 10. Vice Chair Treese will be running that meeting. Thank you. Then our following 2 Tuesdays, we're not meeting. And then we'll reconvene on Tuesday, November 30th with an afternoon work session, much like today, starting at 2 p.m. And then an evening board meeting at 6:30. Are there any other board announcements? Go ahead, Commissioner Rogers.
Well, mine is a very unpleasant one. I don't like ending an evening like this. A very good friend of mine and a good friend of the county who served on this board with me for over 20 years and served the county well, lost his son this morning, Andy Dyke. I'd heard right before this meeting, a few minutes before it, that Andy had lost a son, and so I contacted him directly, and he and I exchanged some emails. Apparently COVID had swept through his shop and his family, and Aaron, his son, died this morning of a heart attack due to COVID. He's also still concerned about his sons, Adam and James, who I knew well, and in fact was on trips with him, and his daughter, Sarah, who recently was married. She's sick as well. So I simply say that our hearts go out to him. I hope I speak for everyone. Prayers. It's a terrible thing for anyone to experience, to bury their children, and he's got others who are not doing well. So it's a horrible thing. And I just wanted to pass it on because Andy not only was a good friend, but a terrific commissioner here in Washington County. So sorry to pass the news.
Thank you, Commissioner Rogers. May I ask again which son this was? This was
Aaron who died.
Aaron. And was he the oldest, I believe?
Yeah, he is.
Thank you.
This virus continues to cause harm in our community. People getting sick, and as evidenced here, some people even dying. So very sad. Unfortunately, our case rates continue to be somewhat high, at least 100 people a day. So along with all the other families in our community and our state who have lost loved ones, our thoughts go out to the family as they grieve this terrible loss. Are there any other board announcements for the evening? Are there any leadership announcements?
I just want to mention that Commissioner Fye dropped off as she's having internet issues and is unable to get on. So just wanted to make that a note.
All righty, thank you. Well, seeing no further announcements, do we have a motion to adjourn this evening's meeting? We have a motion from Commissioner Treese, a second from Commissioner Willie. All those in favor, please vote by raising your hand or saying aye. Thank you, commissioners. Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously 4-0. We're hereby adjourned. Good evening.
Recording stopped.